Hey, yo, folks, we are returning to the Karen Reed case and the Sandra Birchmore case, because what we are about to watch and listen to is Lieutenant John Fanning. Lieutenant John Fanning is the big overlap in both investigations. He under his oversight, there's a lot of lieutenants and whatevers, but here's the thing with Lieutenant Fanning. Lieutenant Fanning was a direct superior of Proctor and Buchanan. He was also from Stoughton. He worked as a Stoughton police officer once upon a time. He was heavily involved in the Sandra Birchmore case and the Karen Reed case. Besides Tully, this is the guy who is like the spider in the web, who should know everything. Lieutenant Fanning is also in Proctor's group chats. Now, they did investigate him, the MSP, Massachusetts State Police, and found that there weren't sufficient evidence, to nobody's surprise. Absolutely nobody's surprise. And one of the things he claimed was ignorance, that he was away on vacation when these texts about Karen Reed occurred. So he didn't see it. Well, now we know that Proctor sent these type of texts daily, over and over again, and did so for over a decade. With that knowledge, we are going to watch the MSP interview, the internal affairs interview, I believe it is, of Lieutenant John Fanning, and compare what he says back in 2024 to what we know now, both regarding the Sandra Birchmore case, the Karen Reed case, and his connections to both Stoughton, his friendship with Devin, who was one of Sandra Birchmore's abusers, and his friendship with Proctor. Oh, this could be an interesting one. Welcome to the show.
Santa Claus, riding in with the winter laws. Santa Claus, streaming live for the roaring masses. Ho, 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 raise them horns, old Judge King in a crown of thorns. Santa Claus, streaming live for the roaring masses. Santa Claus, Santa Claus, Santa Claus, Santa Claus.
Yeah, and of course, rubber ducky jacket, because, as you know, in Canton, they hate rubber duckies. They went so far that Mr. Buchanan investigated the placements of rubber duckies in Canton. He used overtime hours to investigate rubber duckies, put it in front of a judge who said, no. And judge just threw it out. It was that stupid. And since, when I remember, rubber duckies. Who? Madame was Fanning the one who planted the evidence to look like Sandra Birchmore committed self-ending? I do believe that planting was done by Farwell. He made it look like self-ending. and his friends and fellow officers happily, enjoyably, since the only suspect was Mr. Farwell, happily agreed with it. All right. Let's see here. It is 8 p.m. where I am. I see it is 4 a.m. somewhere else in the world, and it's roughly 2 p.m. East Coast. So morning show somewhere, night show somewhere, or daytime drama TV somewhere else. All right. Here it is. And this is audio with the transcript. So I don't need subtitles. It's 1 a.m. in Vietnam. Hey, hi, Skillet. Becky is in Gold Coast, Australia. And I see my internet big sister, Shenanigram, is here as well. Hello, Nanny, EF, Becky, Laurie, hello, Lillian, and hello, guys over at Rumble. Hi, Slidey. All right, are you ready? Again, remember, we now know a whole lot more about Proctor and his texts than was known, at least publicly, in 2024.
Okay. Today's date is Wednesday, August 7th, 2024. The time is 11:32 a.m. This interview is regarding Office of Professional Integrity and Accountability case number IAS 2024-0028 and is being conducted as a virtual interview through Microsoft Teams.
First mistake. Why do you allow this to be through Microsoft Teams? It's an internal affairs investigation. You should have him there, not behind the screen.
The name of the complainant is Major Keith M. Egan, ID number 2733. The commission officer in charge of this investigation is Detective Lieutenant Michael J. Blanchette, ID number 2952. The commission officers conducting this interview are Detective Lieutenant Michael J. Blanchette, ID number 2952, and Detective Lieutenant Chad W. LaLiberty, ID number 2885. The department member to be interviewed is Lieutenant John M. Fanning, ID number 3253. Please state your full name, rank, ID number, and present assignment.
Good morning. My name is Lieutenant John Fanning, Fanning, ID 3253, and I'm currently assigned as the Executive Officer at Norfolk State Police Detective Unit.
Do you understand that this interview is being recorded?
Yeah, at this point in time, Fanning was at, I believe, Executive Officer at Norfolk State Police Detective Unit is the DA's office. Police unit. Yeah. D.A. Morrissey knew how to keep the key players close to him. So, yeah.
Yes, sir.
And again, this is just recorded through a digital audio recorder and not video. Do you understand that you are a witness in this investigation?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is the... Why witness in this investigation? So this is the investigation against Proctor?
Are you familiar with the department's policies and procedures?
I am.
Are you familiar with the department's rules and regulations?
Yes.
Do you acknowledge and understand your rights regarding this interview?
Yes.
Do you understand that you are required to answer all questions truthfully pursuant to rules and regulations, Article 5.27?
Yes.
Other persons present are Attorney Tim Burke. Attorney Burke, do you have any questions prior to this interview?
I don't. Thank you.
Okay. Before we get started, if at any time during the course of this interview you wish to take a break or consult privately with Attorney Burke, just let us know. We will pause the recording devices and allow you that opportunity before we start the interview again, okay?
Yes.
All right. How long have you been employed with the Massachusetts State Police?
19 years.
Can you give me a brief history of where you've been assigned during your career?
Yes. I was a Stoughton police officer from 2002 to 2005. Went to the 78th RTT.
Yeah, Stoughton police officer between 2002 and 2005. Now, this was before Matthew Farwell and those guys started themselves over there. So they don't overlap. Problem for Fanning is, let's see here. I had it here. Dun, dun, dun. Let's see here. Yeah, Fanning had previously served alongside former Stoughton Deputy Chief Robert Devine. So the overlap is already there. And for you who don't know, Robert Devine is the one who started this police youth club where Sandra Birchmore was groomed by Farwell. And Robert Devine also eventually joined in on it, making me believe that Robert Devine's sole reason for starting this youth club was to look for victims. The Stoughton Police Youth Club was their hunting ground. Which makes it a little bit uncanny knowing that John Fanning and Robert Devine have known each other for well over 20 years.
Broke in at the Brighton barracks, transferred to the Danvers barracks, eventually transferred to the Framingham barracks. Was on the Special Emergency Response Team for a period of time between 2007 and 2012. Was a motor vehicle law instructor, drill instructor for the 80th RTT in 2012. I worked as a DRE from 2007 to 2014. After leaving the 80th RTT as a drill instructor, I applied for the Norfolk State Police Detective Unit, and I've been there since. Got promoted to sergeant and stayed. Got promoted to lieutenant, and I stayed within the unit. And for the last 12 years, that's been my assignment within the Norfolk SPDU.
Yeah. So Michael Morrissey has had Lieutenant Fanning under his watch for the past, well, now it is for the past 14 years, because Lieutenant Fanning is still a police officer, despite being involved in and actively ruining two of the most massive cases in Norfolk County history. He fucked both up, and he's still a police officer.
Okay. Your current assignment as the executive officer of SPD Norfolk, what are your duties and responsibilities in that position?
So I supervise the homicide unit, at least partially. Those duties are split between myself and Sergeant Buchanan.
Yeah, working alongside, and since he is a lieutenant and Buchanan is a sergeant, Fanning is technically Buchanan's superior. And Proctor's friend.
Meaning just one of us has an on-call supervisor duty Monday to Monday each week. So this week, while I'm away, the timing worked out where Yuri is the on-call supervisor. When I get back next Monday, I'll become the on-call supervisor for the week. So I have those duties in addition to my executive officer duties. I do the ESs for only one homicide trooper now, which is Trooper John Gendron. And then I cover the three troopers who are in sexual assault, cybercrime, and white-collar crime.
So the guy who screwed up royally the Sandra Birchmore case is still, to my knowledge, within this unit, where he where he is still supervising SA crimes, cybercrime, white-collar crime. Can you spell corruption?
And that's Trooper Prince, Trooper Guarino, Trooper Keefe. I supervise that unit.
Yeah, Guarino, that's the guy. It was that guy, wasn't it? Yeah. So that, again, alongside Tully and Buchanan, Lieutenant Fanning supervised while Trooper Nicholas Guarino missed more than 32,000 text messages between Sandra Birchmore and Matthew Farwell, showing that he started grooming her as a minor and started raping her as a minor. And under Fanning's watch, supervision, who knows, control. All that was missed. And then in the Karen Reed case, he supervised, watched as all these videos were withheld from the defense. A whole lot, because he knows how this works. And he kept quiet.
As also as a duty, and as executive officer, I just do whatever Detective Lieutenant Tully asks me to do. Administrative duties, things that come down from headquarters and the command staff that we have to get done each week.
Yeah, so Tully, Fanning, Buchanan, and then the rest of them. And it's interesting that he says, I just do what Tully tells me to do. That is kind of interesting, now knowing what happened in both investigations.
I just make sure that we collect that information. I either get it to Detective Lieutenant Tully or I handle it if he wants me to handle it. Detective Lieutenant Tully does.
Thank you, madam. Yeah, let's not forget Fanning was in charge of the jury in the Karen Reed first trial. Yeah. Can you spell corruption?
The payroll. I do the EESs for those troopers that I mentioned, and that's pretty much it. Just supervising the day-to-day activities and the homicides.
Okay. And Detective Lieutenant Tully is the unit commander for SPD Norfolk?
Yes, sir.
Have you worked with Detective Lieutenant Tully prior to him becoming the unit commander?
Yes. He came into the office approximately 4 months after I did. So I came in April of 2012. He came in late June, early July of 2012.
Okay, so you have worked together as troopers and as sergeants and lieutenants, and now as him as the unit commander, and you're the executive officer?
That's very nice to know how the pyramid of responsibilities work. And Tully and Fanning has been working together at that point in time for 12 years, and now longer.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'd like to direct your attention to the State Police Detective Unit for Norfolk, assigned to the Norfolk DA's office, regarding the death investigation of Mr. John O'Keefe that occurred on January 22nd of 2022. Are you familiar with that case?
I am.
And as a result of that investigation, Miss Karen Reed was identified as a suspect and charged and recently tried by the Norfolk District Attorney's Office that resulted in a mistrial. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Was Trooper Michael Proctor assigned as the case officer for that investigation?
He was the on-call trooper. So yes, by the fact that he was the on-call trooper, he was assigned.
Yeah. Remember in the second trial how every cop in existence tried to downgrade Trooper Proctor as just one of the blokes. They lied under oath to the court and the jury, all knowing that Trooper Proctor was the assigned officer, the lead detective. They all knew, and they all lied. Now, Lieutenant Fanning, he didn't testify, I think, in the first trial. He didn't testify in any of them, which is interesting because I believe in the civil case, they should absolutely try to depose Lieutenant Fanning.
Okay. And in February of 2024, which was prior to the beginning of the trial against Miss Karen Reed, were you aware that Trooper Proctor provided testimony in front of a federal grand jury?
Yes.
And how
Was he aware before? I'm sorry. Was he aware before it took place or after the testimony?
What?
I wasn't sure about your question, Lieutenant, whether he was aware of him testifying before it actually occurred or after it.
Seriously, Mr. Lieutenant Fanning, are you asking if Trooper Proctor was aware that he testified before the grand jury before or after he testified in the trial? Well, you would hope he knows the sequence of events. The very fact that you question it, yeah.
Okay. Those are my next questions.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt your flow here.
Yes, sir. How did you become aware?
I was aware I was aware before his testimony that he had to go to federal grand jury. I was aware that him and Sergeant Buchanan were both subpoenaed to go to federal grand jury prior to that February 1st date. And I was aware that Trooper Proctor testified on February 1st, but Sergeant Buchanan did not.
That is interesting because the question is, how did you become aware? Not if you were aware. And this is quite detailed. Meaning, both Proctor and Buchanan told him. Which means everybody knew. And then played ignorance.
Okay. So on February 1st, after Trooper Proctor testified in front of the grand jury, did you have an opportunity to speak with him?
I spoke with Sergeant Buchanan. Because it was my understanding, and it was their understanding, that they were each going to testify at federal grand jury for approximately 2 hours. Trooper Proctor was going to go first, and Sergeant Buchanan was going to go after. I had contacted Sergeant Buchanan to see if he had concluded his testimony or had testified yet, and he had stated that Trooper Proctor was still testifying.
So in the middle of testimony, you kept checking in. Why? You weren't called. You were not supposed to know much about this, which leads me to believe, are they telling on me? That is Lieutenant Fanning's big worry here. Are they telling on him? Are they telling the grand jury how much I knew? Hi, David. Video 2 or just audio? This is audio and the transcript. Sadly, the interviewers did not do this in person. They did it via video link. So no video, just audio for some odd reason.
I'm not exactly sure how I learned he finished. It could have been through Sergeant Buchanan, but I was concerned for Trooper Proctor. I was really concerned about his well-being because he had thought he was going to be in there for 2 hours. It turns out he was in there for 6.5 hours or so of federal grand jury testimony.
Were you concerned for Trooper Proctor, or were you desperately trying to find out if Trooper Proctor snitched on you, Lieutenant Fanning? I would say Lieutenant Fanning didn't care 2 bits at this point in time. Yeah, he might have cared about Proctor, but primarily he was worried about himself. That is my interpretation here.
So at some point, I talked to Detective Lieutenant Tully and told him we should go to Trooper Proctor's house and check in on him. We also were aware that his wife was away. Trooper Proctor was under an extreme amount of stress at that time with everything going on. So,
really, again, knowing now what wasn't known then, with Trooper Proctor's mental health state, this tells me they knew Trooper Proctor was a loose cannon. They absolutely knew. And they let him do the investigation into John O'Keefe, knowing he didn't have the mental state for it. And we now know Fanning was a part of the group chats. He knew all along that Trooper Proctor was a raging misogynist, raging racist, probably member of a local Austrian painter fan club. And what does that tell us about Lieutenant John Fanning? If he's friends with both the local Schnazis and friends for over 20 years with former police chief Devin, who enjoyed the company of minors. What does that tell us about Fanning?
really the focus of the visit was to check in with him and really his well-being. I was really concerned with his well-being, so it wasn't so much the content of his testimony as the reason for the visit, it was really more to check in and see how he was doing.
Okay. Were you at SPDU Norfolk on February 1st at the time that Trooper Proctor was testifying at the federal grand jury?
I was various places. No, I wasn't. I did go to work that day. I was working, and I don't recall exactly where I went.
So you recall being extremely anxious about Trooper Proctor's testimony and Sergeant Buchanan's testimony at the federal grand jury. You were so worried, you don't even remember what you did that day. But you remember that. You were so worried you couldn't even do your job.
I'm not exactly sure where I went that day or kind of the sequence of events that day, but eventually I did learn that Trooper Proctor was still in there for the majority of the day, and we went to his house later that night after hours, I believe.
Okay.
After regular work hours.
Okay. And were you at the office at some point with Detective Tully to commute to see Trooper Proctor, or was that through a phone call to make arrangements?
Phone call.
And,
phone call.
Okay. Do you recall where you were when Detective Lieutenant Tully called you?
I called him.
Okay. And Did Detective Lieutenant Tully make you aware of whether or not he had a conversation with Trooper Proctor prior to going to his house that night?
I do not recall that.
Okay. And did you meet Detective Lieutenant Tully prior to going to Trooper Proctor's house that night?
We could have, yes. We may have met before. I don't recall where we met, but we did meet. I'm not positive if we met. I just remember going there. We were both in our own cruisers. I honestly don't recall if we met earlier that night.
Okay.
Or beforehand.
Okay. Did Detective Lieutenant Tully inform you of some of the information that he was aware of that Trooper Proctor had testified to at federal grand jury prior to going over to Trooper Proctor's house?
How did Tully find that out? How did Tully find that out? Well, because everybody talked to each other to get their story straight. Everybody covering for each other because everybody had something to lose. Because they already knew they were caught. This is crisis management from what I believe, and I'm convinced is, the local Schnauzy group. Yay! Bacon Bears! Thank you for joining me yesterday. Thank you so much. Ah, and you became a member. Thank you. So yeah, it seems like everybody talked to everybody in that unit to get their stories straight. And everybody knew that Proctor was a loose cannon. As Shennigan says, so he's been an unstable mental case, and Fanning was still cool with him holding a gun for backup. Yeah.
No.
Okay. Do you recall if you arrived first at Trooper Proctor's house?
We both arrived around the same time.
Okay. And did you go into the house together?
We did.
Okay. Were there any other department members present at Trooper Proctor's house?
No.
Do you recall about what time you and Detective Tully went to his house?
7, 8 o'clock. Sounds about right. 7 or 8 p.m.
Okay. And the reason why you and Detective Lieutenant Tully were going there was because you're the one who called Detective Lieutenant Tully with your concerns for Trooper Proctor?
That's how I remember it, yes.
Okay. And when you're talking to Trooper Proctor, does Trooper Proctor explain or describe some of the testimony that he provided at federal grand jury to you and Detective Lieutenant Tully?
I don't recall us getting into much content.
Bullshit.
The feeling that I had was, and it still remains that way, is that federal grand jury secret. So I didn't really want to get into details with Mike. I let him talk. Really, we came in, how are you doing? Are you okay? He did speak about his testimony. He stated that it was pretty much all personal texts that, right from the beginning through 6.5 hours was pretty much exclusively personal text messages with various people. And I don't recall specific detail other than he did have concerns about some of the things that were brought up that could be brought up at trial about Karen Reed, things that he had said about her, but he didn't get into specifics about what exactly was in those texts.
Lieutenant Fanning, you were in that very group chat. You were in there. You were a part of it.
And that that he did state that his lawyer said there could be issues with the job on some of the things that were brought out, meaning personnel investigations into some of the things that were brought out in text message.
Okay, when you mention his lawyer, is that something that Trooper Proctor told you, or is that his lawyer was present?
No, that's
Revealing information like this, or revealing information about what him and his lawyer talked about, that's interesting. I doubt it can be used to nullify the confidentiality, but you can always clump a lot of things together. Is this guy related to the officer that destroyed all their phones? No. Part of the thin blue line. He was Proctor's superior and friend, and Proctor was the Proctors were second family to the Alberts.
something he told me. It was just us there, just us three there. But Trooper Proctor said that to us.
Okay. So I'm just going to ask some specifics of certain text messages, whether or not he had mentioned them to you and Detective Lieutenant Tully while at his house that evening. Did he indicate that he called Miss Reed and I'm not going to say the word, but I'll just spell it, C-U-N-T, in some of those text messages?
No.
You were in that group chat, but you said, oh, I was on vacation, so I didn't see those. Yeah, but you were in the group chat for years, looking at everything Proctor shared.
Did he describe that during his grand jury testimony that they had asked him with regard to him making disparaging comments about Miss Reed's appearance in those text messages?
Hold on. Mr. Jingles is over there meowing like a maniac, which means he caught something and he wants to show me. Which means I have to hope it's not a baby hair and that it's easy to throw out. I'll be right back. Oh, yeah, there it is. Yeah. Here, Mr. Jingles. Here. Entertain the masses while I go throw out the rats. Yeah, that was Mr. Jingles proudly showing off a quarter rat, which is good. It's good that it keeps the the farm clean. Do I speak to Mr. Jingles in Swedish or English? English while on stream, Swedish otherwise. All right, let's keep going. Good boy.
No, not about her appearance. The feeling I had was that he had made disparaging comments about Miss Reed, but the actual content of those I did not know.
And he didn't describe that particular text to you and Detective Lieutenant Tully that night?
No.
And did he describe a text that he had been searching for nudes in Miss Reed's cell phone data extraction? Do you recall him telling you that night, you and
And now we know that this was reoccurring from Proctor to showing people in these group chats the images he had, both racist and other types, while simultaneously complaining he could not, about his ex, could not grape her while she slept. And stuff like that. And Fanning was a part of those group chats. We know that now.
Detective Lieutenant Tully?
No.
Okay. When he did describe some of his grand jury testimony, what are some of the specifics that you can recall him saying that night?
It was, the conversation, as I remember, was really about kind of the mechanics of what happened. He went in, he was prepared to answer all these different questions regarding the case. That's what he thought he was going in there for. He had prepped with his lawyer. I remember that when he first got in there, he started getting, the first text was a text between his mother and sister and him. And he was kind of taken back, as I recall, that this was the first thing that was, being brought up. And that continued for 6.5 hours. I think there were some breaks in there, and he had talked with his lawyer. And really, he was just saying that they didn't give him target warnings or anything like that, and
that is quite interesting. That Proctor was surprised he was not getting any heads up. Well, is that what he was used to in other testimonies towards grand juries where he was a part of the investigation? That once in the DA's office, here is what we're going to ask you, and you just tell us what we want to know. Well, here he was caught off guard. He was not prepared for the fact that he was the bad guy. That he was there not for promoting the current narrative. He was there because the feds found out he was a corrupt piece of human garbage. Because Proctor's been protected while in MSP and under the supervision of Fanning and Tully and Buchanan, always protected, who seemingly all knew Proctor was a loose cannon. Interesting.
he just continued to answer their questions and try to redirect them back to the facts of the case, as opposed to these text messages. In our entire conversation with Trooper Proctor, I do not remember any specific language that he used, other than I left there with the understanding that he had made some disparaging remarks about Karen Reed. And
you are not answering questions for 6.5 hours just about the specifics surrounding Karen Reed. I so want to know what's in his testimony, what the feds actually know. Because we now know a whole lot more. There's a whole lot that we still don't know. A whole lot. And Proctor was surprised they knew. Which means the feds got a judge to sign off on a complete, you can take everything. Everything that, every trace of Proctor that is online is free range for the federal investigation. And which we now know is more or less everything he ever posted from 2013 to 2024.
And it was likely going to come out in testimony at some point, and that, there was at least some concern from his lawyer that it could lead to a personnel investigation.
And now we all know that even the police union abandoned Proctor. It was that bad what they found out.
That was really the extent. I do not recall any specific language, and that carried through until I watched his testimony during the trial. There was never a point where someone told me the specific language that...
He keeps using specific language. And, I'm a big fan of keeping track of the wordings people use. And in this case, every time Fanning talks about specific language, is because he doesn't want to give testimony about the broad language. He don't want to reiterate what his interpretation was. He keeps going back to specific language because he doesn't want to tell anyone what Proctor actually testified about. Probably because it includes him.
Mike had used in testimony. It was just, I knew that there were things that he was going to have to answer to when he went on the stand, and that was a little bit a part of his trial prep. He had to prepare himself for those questions with the ADAs assigned to the case.
Okay. Were there any, when he mentions that there's these various communications with these various people, do either you or Detective Lieutenant Tully make some inquiries to kind of get a pretty good idea of what those communications consisted of?
He didn't say who those, meaning who he said those things to?
Yeah,
like in text message.
Yeah, like if if he tells you that there were these communications, between him and his mother and other people, and they were concerning. Did you make any inquiry, or did Detective Lieutenant Tully make any inquiry of what the content of those messages were, and what the problem or issue with them were?
No, because I'll go back to the fact that I know that federal grand jury is a secret process, and I did not ask at any point during that entire meeting with Trooper Proctor specific details.
There's a slight change in his tone here that leads me to believe that he has been prepped for this interview. But they are still asking questions that makes him uncomfortable. And we now know that Fanning was a part of the chat groups, which included Nazi stuff and misogynistic stuff, racist stuff. We now know he was a part of it. Lisa asks, who is interviewing? The interviewer, I forgot his name, It's in the beginning of the stream, he says his name, but I believe this is internal affairs.
Quite frankly, if I went over there and he didn't tell me anything about it, I would have been fine with that. The whole purpose of that visit was to go there and check on his well-being. He shared those things. Again, not specifics, not who those things were communicated with. I do just specifically remember that.
Well, he doesn't have to say it because he's talking to two people who knows, who already knows, because at least Fanning was a part of it. So he didn't need to say specifics because he was already talking to people who were involved in it.
It started with that communication between his sister and mother, and he was taken back by that. But I did not leave that day knowing who specifically he spoke to, whether it was within the office or friends of his. I mean, I learned later when we went to trial, but that night, I did not leave with any specific knowledge about the content of what it was and who he was communicating with.
Again, we now know you were a part of it.
Okay. And I know you refer to the federal grand jury system as being secret. Like the proceedings are secret. However, if a witness outside of those proceedings talks about it, then that's not a secret, right?
Well, certainly it's not a secret because he told someone, but I'm not going to try to break those rules.
But if he told you, then he broke the rule, not you. I'm doing my best to not be on any federal grand jury's list or break any rules relative to federal grand jury. Because you're protecting yourself here, Fanning. Because you know you were a part of it. A part of the cover-up in the Ken Reed case and a part of the cover-up in the Sandra Birchmore case.
Okay.
Federal law for that matter.
Okay, so I'll bring it back this way. Were you anticipated to be a witness in the federal grand jury?
Not that I was aware of.
You weren't subpoenaed?
No.
Okay. So you weren't bound by the federal grand jury of not to talk about a case. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I wasn't bound by anything relative to that case, no.
Okay. And were you aware of a non-disclosure agreement?
That came later?
Yes.
Yes.
Were you a part of that? Did you have to sign that non-disclosure agreement?
I did not. I read it, but I did not sign it.
Okay.
Oh,
were
really?
you aware of who the other department members that were signed it and were bound by it?
Only Detective Lieutenant Tully that I'm aware of.
Okay. How long did you and Detective Lieutenant Tully meet with Trooper Proctor that night?
I would say an hour or two.
Okay. And did yourself or Detective Lieutenant Tully admonish or counsel Trooper Proctor for these text message communications while at the house?
I did not. And I don't recall specifically what Detective Lieutenant Tully said to Brian, said to Trooper.
Said to Brian? Hold on here. Let's go back a bit.
Recall specifically what Detective Lieutenant Tully said to Brian.
Brian. Which Brian? Brian Albert? Was Brian Albert around when you went to Proctor's house? Or was he on the phone? Also checking in. That, folks, is a Freudian slip. It's right there. So after Proctor testified to the federal grand jury, Tully, Fanning went to Proctor's house and somehow, in person or via phone, well, okay, yeah, okay. Tully's first name is also Brian, is it? Yeah, okay. So, yeah, his first name is Brian. Brian Tully. So, okay. You have Brian Albert, Brian Higgins, and Brian Tully. So, benefit of the doubt, Mr. Tully is such a good friend, he calls him Brian, and it's a slip of the tongue. Or, nefariously, another Brian was listening in. Folks, you decide. You decide.
Said to Trooper Proctor, I know he was concerned if he was speaking about the defendant and there were disparaging remarks about the defendant. I believe he said something to the effect of, if there's comments that you made about the defendant, you're going to have to deal with those, and the judge's going to have to deal with them. But I don't remember specifically how that was said, but that was kind of my... Brian was... Sorry, Detective Lieutenant Tully was...
Okay, now he caught himself again. So, yeah, we can conclude that he was actually talking about Detective Lieutenant Tully. But they are so close and so good friends, they go by first name, just as Fanning talks about then Trooper Proctor as Mike. Remember who else says Mike about Trooper Proctor? Jen McCabe does. We saw it in her interview, how Proctor's phone number in her phone was listed under Mike Proctor. Not Michael, Mike.
If they're more stern with Trooper Proctor about those things, and that he was going to, they were going to have to be addressed. But again, I didn't recall any specific language that he used, just that they were just disparaging remarks about Karen Reed. That's how I remember it that night.
Okay. Did you and Detective Lieutenant Tully have a conversation or any type of personal interaction to talk about this information that was provided by Trooper Proctor and how you felt about it?
Yeah, so after we did, I talked to Detective Lieutenant Tully, and he was going to make GHQ aware that there was bad language used in regards to Karen Reed, and that
He, since the cat was out of the bag, he had to tell others. Here's my opinion. They already knew. They kept it under wraps because Proctor was useful. He did what they said. And they trusted him enough because they are part of the same friend group. Tully, Fanning, Proctor, and the Alberts. It's just connecting the dots.
if we become aware of it, we'll have to address. He's going to address it. Detective Lieutenant Tully, had taken the lead on handling that, and that was what he was going to do. Detective Lieutenant Tully's a squared away guy. He gets his stuff done.
Yeah, we know that. He Tully is probably the person in that group with who is the smartest guy in the group. He knows how to put others on the forefront so he could be in the background with plausible deniability. But he knew. He knew. I'm convinced he knew, because as Fanning says here, he's the kind of guy to get his stuff done. Which leads me to believe that nothing happened in either the Ken Reed case or the Sandra Birchmore case that Tully wasn't either aware of or controlled.
He, once he says he's going to do it, if he needs help from me, he'll ask me. But we never, I shouldn't say we never spoke about it. We didn't speak about that. I knew that Brian was going to make GHQ aware. I didn't follow up on that. And then approximately within the week, Trooper Proctor was brought up to headquarters to speak with legal and Major Coppenrath. Excuse me.
Yeah. Again, sequence of events here, because the DA's office claims they were not aware of the extended texts and messages from Proctor. But here we have, right around the first trial, GHQ, legal, and DA Morrissey was made aware. If they didn't already know, they were made aware. They absolutely was made aware. Meaning, when they claim they didn't know the scope of Proctor's absolutely vile text until, what was it, October 2025 or something, or October 2024, whatever date, they knew much earlier. They knew at and around the first trial.
And Detective Lieutenant Tully and I knew about that. I believe he notified me that Trooper Proctor was up there with his lawyer, meeting with legal and Major Coppenrath. So after that conversation, we obviously, myself and Detective Lieutenant Tully talk, but I knew that he was handling it, and it was being handled up at headquarters.
Yeah, damage control, because they still, at this point in time, there's no chance in hell that the DA's office and the supervisors and GHQ and legal knew that the entire investigation surrounding Karen Reed was absolutely beyond redemption, destroyed. And they still went ahead with it.
Okay. I'm just gonna use your words of how you referred to it as, that Detective Lieutenant Tully was going to advise GHQ of the bad language for Trooper Proctor. What was the bad language?
Well, what he said, I just go back to disparaging remarks. Again, I do not recall any time when I sat with Trooper Proctor that he said, I said this, and I said that, and I said this.
Again, check the language. He doesn't recall any time when he sat with Trooper Proctor and he said, they said, we said. That's not the question here. The question is what was being shared between the two of you in text messages. The wordings here are important. How Fanning tries to deflect that he absolutely knew all of this because he was a part of it?
I do not have memory that he was telling us specifics.
Okay. And what is the policy, or what is the standard practice at SPDU Norfolk when a member of the unit is to be admonished or counseled? How is that documented?
Well, I mean, I think there would be, certainly there's verbal counseling. Typically, we would do that. I mean, if it was an instance where you had to interject in front of everyone, a verbal counseling like that, or to bring someone into the office and verbally counsel them, something like this, I would say, counseling them and probably a negative EES would follow.
Okay. Were you ever aware of afterward whether or not Detective Lieutenant Tully documented any type of admonishment or counseling for Trooper Proctor with regard to this issue?
Well, I think there's a couple different issues. The first I learned of the counseling was when Detective Lieutenant Tully testified. I was one of the few troopers in the office that wasn't sequestered, so I didn't watch every moment of testimony, but I did see Detective Lieutenant Tully did address this with Trooper Proctor, as he stated in testimony. We never talked about that. Brian never told me about that. I spoke to him after the fact, and he said, he had handled it and spoke to Trooper Proctor. In regards to the negative EES and addressing it with Trooper Proctor, as I stated, we had no specifics, or at least I don't want to speak for Detective Lieutenant Tully because his memory, he's a smart guy. His memory is probably a lot better than mine. I do not recall specific language that we would have addressed. If we knew it fast forward, which we did, then certainly I think there was a place to address those specific terms and the things that we knew. But when I left Trooper Proctor's house that night, I did not have this. I just knew that he had made disparaging remarks about Mrs. Reed, and that was going to have to, that was going to come out in testimony, and for sure it was going to have to be addressed at some point. If we fast forward to answer your question, I saw Trooper Proctor's testimony, not all of it, but at least some of it. Like I said, everyone else was sequestered, including Detective Lieutenant Tully. He knew of some of the language later because he signed that NDA and had been read in by the two ADAs. So again, just kind of knowing the position he was in.
This is getting infuriating because, again, we now know that he was a part of the group chats that had all of this shit in it. He was a part of it. And here he is deflecting.
I'm not exactly sure how he was going to handle that. He did sign an NDA, and he was sequestered. I didn't talk to him or anyone else in the office about testimony that I had seen. They weren't watching it. And so I'm not exactly sure how he was going to address that other than verbally counseling Trooper Proctor, again, as I heard him say in testimony.
Okay, and how did you become aware that he was read in those text messages?
Well, I wouldn't say he was read in on those text messages. I'm not exactly sure what he was read in on, but he told me he was going to sign the NDA and be read in to those federal documents.
Okay. And he never discussed with you afterwards anything about that information?
No, he just said it was what Trooper Proctor had told us, which there were disparaging remarks or something in that, however he said it, but that there was disparaging comments and that Trooper Proctor was going to have to, he was going to get, grilled on the stand about that commentary.
Okay. Did you have any further conversations with Trooper Proctor or even Detective Lieutenant Tully prior to that non-disclosure agreement about Trooper Proctor's communications?
No, I did not.
DLT, Low Liberty, do you have any additional questions?
I do not. Thank you.
Attorney Burke, do you have any questions?
I do.
Okay.
Sir, good morning. The state police is a paramilitary organization,
Yes, sir.
and you subsequently learned that the following day, Detective Lieutenant Tully notified his supervisor of the substance of the information that he had learned the previous night from Michael Proctor.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so
Interesting. So the day after, Tully notified his supervisors of the substance of the information. Well, Fanning was in the same room. He was in the same room.
the Department of State Police is put on notice the following day the substance of the conversation that Lieutenant Tully and yourself had with Michael McDonald. True?
With Trooper Proctor, yes. Again, what Detective Lieutenant Tully passed along, I'm obviously not privy to. I wasn't there, but he did tell me he notified up the chain of command.
All right. I misspoke. I said Michael Proctor.
Yes.
So the information that's given to yourself and Lieutenant Tully is subsequently provided to his supervisor, and that's Major Coppenrath.
I'm not sure who it would technically be Detective Captain Jerry Collins and then Major
Okay.
Coppenrath,
right,
but I'm
so
not
that
sure
would be the
exactly
chain
who
of-
he spoke to.
That would be the chain of command.
Yes, sir.
And do you know when this non-disclosure agreement was signed by Lieutenant Tully?
Sometime in March or April.
Okay, and the EES evaluation would be taking place sometime in April, a month or so after the non-disclosure agreement is signed?
Yes, sir. April 15th.
Okay, and in terms of what you observed on the part of Lieutenant Tully, you described him as being more stern than you were?
Yes, if you know both of us, Detective Lieutenant Tully's a more serious type. I think that's why we've worked well together. He's a more serious type. He's a student. He's a really smart guy, and he's firm for sure. So once I knew he was handling it, I knew it was going to get done.
Given the circumstances that this was a federal grand jury and your concerns about secrecy, did you think that Lieutenant Tully's approach or response to learning of Trooper Proctor, Detective Proctor's disparaging remarks was appropriate under those circumstances?
I do. Again, I can't emphasize enough that Trooper Proctor was under an extreme amount of stress. That doesn't change the things that he had said that at least I later learned through his testimony about Miss Reed. But there was an extreme amount of stress in the office, and in particular Trooper Proctor. His family was being harassed.
Aww.
All the people around him were being harassed.
Aww. Harassed. We knew long before the first trial started that Trooper Proctor was a bad apple, a corrupt piece of human garbage. The stress was him being exposed over and over again. And you, Fanning, in this interview are telling more or less outright how you still, at that point in time, tried to protect him. And again, you saw it, you were in the damn group chat where he made these remarks. You were in there.
It was, I can't emphasize enough that when we went there, we were really going there for his well-being, in particular because his wife was not home. And I thought Detective Lieutenant Tully handled it well. I felt we were under constraints. I know the DLT mentioned that, it's not a secret if he tells us, but I didn't feel it was my place to kind of grill at Trooper Proctor and prod and ask what they asked him. If they ever called me as a witness or something later, I think that would be, it could be problematic. And I do think Detective Lieutenant Tully specifically was, he was bound by that NDA. I read that NDA.
Well, why did you read the NDA? Were you presented with an NDA that you then didn't sign?
It was, I believe, a 9 or 10 page document. It was very specific that whoever was read in, any of that information was supposed to be used for the state court action against Karen Reed. It was very specific to that.
Interesting. So the NDA was more or less, my interpretation, the NDA was about do not talk about Proctor. That is what the DA's office had going. Do not talk about Proctor. Because they were still, despite knowing all this, they were still trying to frame Karen Reed. Their sole purpose was to keep information from the defense. That was their only objective. Keep information from the defense.
And honestly, I was shocked at how lengthy the document was, and specific it was to the state court action against Karen Reed.
In addition to his response to learning about at least the overall disparaging comments, did he indicate to Detective Proctor that he was going to have to report it to his supervisors, and that Trooper Proctor, Detective Proctor, was going to have to deal with the consequences of his conduct?
Yes.
Okay. And in fact, you now know that's exactly what he did. He notified his direct supervisor and GHQ of the issues that he had learned about regarding these disparaging comments the following day. Is that true?
Yes.
Yeah, so while Fanning and Tully was in the house, Tully apparently remembered what Proctor talked about. The words used, what he told, the questions asked and answered in the federal grand jury, but somehow Fanning has no recollection of it. Isn't that strange? How these corrupt officers' memory are this bad? And these are officers who since then been at other trials testifying with perfect recollection. But in this very case, it is, weird, sudden amnesia. Isn't that strange?
Okay. I have nothing else. Thank you.
Is there anything, Lieutenant Fanning, is there anything that we didn't ask you that you feel we should have asked, or is there anything that you would like to add or feel that is important or helpful regarding this investigation?
No, I think what I just added kind of summed up, the interaction with Trooper Proctor and Detective Lieutenant Tully's actions. So no, I don't have anything to add, sir.
I have one last question, if you don't mind. Sir, given your reading of that non-disclosure agreement, Was it your impression that that would have prohibited Detective Tully from commenting or making any reference to the disparaging comments and the subsequent April EES evaluation of Detective Proctor?
Yes, I do.
Ta-da. So the sole purpose of that non-disclosure was to protect Proctor. The sole reason for the DA's non-disclosure agreement was to protect Proctor so that they could still frame Karen Reed.
And I would have been, if I was read in and signed that, I think I would have even had concern of passing that information along to headquarters, to be honest with you. I think he did.
Interesting. So Fanning, had he signed the NDA, he would have issues telling headquarters about Proctor's conduct. That, again, the DA's office protecting Proctor because they were not interested in the flaws and faults of the investigation. They just wanted to, quote unquote, pin it on the girl.
I think Detective Lieutenant Tully did the right thing by passing that information along. I think the job has, they should be concerned and have a heads up as to what's coming. But if it was specific language and things like that, I think I would, after reading that, I would be very careful on the wording I used, passing that information along to anyone.
Including his supervisors.
Yes.
But nevertheless, he did that the following day, correct?
That's what he told me.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I have nothing else. Thank you, gentlemen.
Well, that raises a couple more questions for me. If he knew the specific content of some of these text messages prior to signing a non-disclosure, immediately after being told by Trooper Proctor after he testified in federal grand jury, do you think that information, it would be appropriate to document in a negative EES or be part of that eval?
I'll say it again, sir. I did not leave there with specific words or commentary other than he had made comments about Mrs. Reed that were going to be a problem. But I did not leave there with any specific word or descriptive the word that you used earlier that he had used. That I do not recall him stating specifics like that.
And it wasn't in reference to you. It was in reference to Detective Lieutenant Tully. Had he had that information prior to signing a non-disclosure agreement, do you think it would have been appropriate for his evaluation report of Trooper Proctor?
I think I'd want to see it. I think
when you say it, what do you mean?
I'd like to see the text messages, and I'd like to, or read the grand jury minutes before I would take an action like that. I mean, he was just out on the stand for 6.5 hours, and so yeah, I don't know. Me personally, I would have liked to have seen the actual text messages, or had specifics about them. But I think there's.
Yeah, again, he was in that group chat where those messages were conveyed. I mean, there's no question if he knew. It's a question of when he knew. When he was he claims he was on vacation when those texts were submitted, so he didn't see them. What? You didn't have your phone with you on vacation, Lieutenant Fanning? When you got back, you didn't check your phone After you went to Proctor's, you didn't check your phone to see, oh, where are they? Bullshit. Absolute bullshit from Fanning.
A lot of different, I would say that I would like to see them first before I would take action.
So if a department member informs you that they had these specific communications and it's they're not fabricated, the department member indicates that they're not fabricated, that these occurred, you would still need to see those messages to corroborate before making a full assessment?
I think the question's unfair. I think I would have to sit down and interview him. I wasn't interviewing Trooper Proctor. I would have to sit down and go over and take notes. And, that was not the intent of that meeting. We're talking about a guy, potentially killing himself.
They knew Trooper Proctor was possibly going to end himself. They knew Proctor was a loose cannon. They knew Proctor was a fucking basket case. They knew that before they went there. How long before they went there? Because usually, folks, a cop on the stand in a grand jury or otherwise are fine. But once they learned that Trooper Proctor wasn't asked about his investigation, but was asked about his conduct, they must have known this for years, decade, that Trooper Proctor was a basket case. And they still allowed him a gun and a badge and to run investigations. That's insane. What length they were prepared to go to protect Trooper Proctor. Former disgraced Trooper Proctor. They went there because they were scared he was going to end himself. But they didn't call an ambulance because that means making a call. That means making a record. They were so scared for themselves that they went there. Because if Trooper Proctor ended himself after that federal grand jury testimony, then the eyes would have gone to the people who were in charge of him. And his direct superiors, Buchanan, Fanning, Tully, all knew. They all knew about Proctor, Proctor's opinions, Proctor's words, because they were all a part of it.
Who?
That was the concern. Trooper Proctor, that was the concern when we went to his house. So, no, I don't think it was appropriate to stop, take notes, and ask him specific questions about text messages.
No,
it was not appropriate.
And
highly inappropriate. The welfare of him was what was the purpose of that meeting.
No, I understand. I think you're. That's not what I was asking.
Well, you're asking me a hypothetical that was not the situation. So yes, by policy and procedure, sir, 100% right.
By policy and procedure, they should have investigated. But they chose not to protect themselves. They talked Proctor out of ending himself so that the investigation would not turn to them and what they knew.
But that specific instance, no, that was not the case. That was not the situation. I didn't get into content with him. I don't remember Detective Lieutenant Tully getting into content with him. I don't think it's fair to ask a hypothetical that was not even close to the situation we were in. Yes, the question you're asking me, different series of facts, certainly, for sure, but not in that specific incident.
Okay. Attorney Burke?
Yes, but just so we're clear on this, even assuming for the moment that he knew everything that was in that grand jury testimony, when was the EES due to be signed and prepared? Isn't that April of 2024?
Well, I believe that would be like the normally scheduled one.
Okay, so that's the
person can do
normally
a supervisory
scheduled time.
observation report at any time
Right.
that an incident occurs, which is a
Right.
difference.
Okay.
Yeah, you can do an EES, Attorney Burke, for positive and negative incidents.
Okay. And this was reported to the department the following day, correct? The general headquarters.
Yes.
Do you know what, if any, action the department took at that point in time?
I do not. I just know that Trooper Proctor was up at headquarters with Major Copperrath and legal within the week.
Okay. And was that information available to the department within that week as well?
Yes, they were the ones who interviewed Trooper Proctor.
Okay.
And it was
But
my
they
understanding that they
specifically-
interviewed him about federal grand jury, a more formal interview about what occurred at federal grand jury.
Certainly more formal and detailed than what occurred with you and Lieutenant Tully.
For sure. Yes.
Thank you.
Sir, okay. Yeah, I don't think he was there for that meeting. If there's anything to clarify with this interview, if you have any more questions, that'd be great, Attorney Burke.
I'm all set. Thank you, Lieutenant.
Okay. Lieutenant Fanning, do you have anything to add?
No, sir.
Okay. I appreciate you taking the time out. I understand you're on vacation and you're away from here, and hopefully you get to enjoy some time with your family and friends. All right.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
day, gents.
This
Okay.
concludes
Thank you,
the interview. The time is 12:19 p.m.
Yeah. Knowing now what we didn't know back then, this has been, it's more revealing. First of all, we already know now. Oh, not already, but we know now that Fanning was in the group chats. We already know that. He saw the misogynistic text. He saw the racist text. He saw the Schnazi. He saw it all. We already know that Proctor is a basket case and has been a basket case for a very long time, protected by Fanning, Buchanan, and Tully. And if they knew, D.A. Morrissey knew, and everybody let him have a gun. Everybody let him have a badge. Everybody let him lead investigations, knowing he was a basket case, knowing he was a racist, knowing everything, and still allowed him to do what he did. They were more interested in protecting Proctor than finding the truth about the murder of John O'Keefe. Yeah, Lieutenant Fanning is still a police officer because the internal affairs investigation against him concluded that there was not enough evidence for a disciplinary action. He's still a cop. Tully has he's now at, oh, wait a minute. Brian Tully is now a teacher for a private company who educates new cops. How about that? Almost every cop who was involved in the Karen Read case and the overlap with the Sandra Birchmore case are now retired. They just left. They were fired because Jen McCabe decided that instead of blaming Lucky for the death of John O'Keefe, decided to blame Karen Read. That morning, the decision was taken because Karen Read, if Karen Read had woken up 2 hours later, John O'Keefe would already have been found, and they would have blamed the plow driver Lucky. But because they decided to blame Karen Read, careers are ruined. Lives are ruined. And every week we find out something new about the corruption in Norfolk County. Every damn week. Tomorrow, with the knowledge we have now, we are going to watch when Tully is interviewed in July of 2024. That will be interesting to see his recollection of events. Now remember, Tully is much more intelligent than Fanning is. But that's for tomorrow. Thanks for listening in. If you have questions, post it in the comment section. Do all the YouTube things. And from me and Mr. Klingels, who jumped off, thank you. It's you guys who makes this possible. Thank you so much. And I will see you all tomorrow. You all have a good one. Bye-bye.
Santa Claus, riding in with the winter law.